So it's not just that, these things happened and therefore you had these kind of trauma responses over time. That's true. And, right? That's true. And now, how, as an adult woman, do I be with that? How do I validate it in a way that then I can, get some better ways to adjust, to adapt, to understand at a different level? Like all these rules that, because of how we respond and how we see the world, really narrow our vistas, right? So, I'm in questions of things about my life, my lifestyle, the structure that I would never have considered 2 years ago. And it is such, on the other side of that, or partnered with it, I guess more aptly said, is like, it's beautiful. It's
All right. Well, I'm so honored to have Barbara Burgess on the podcast. So thank you so much for being here.
oh, such a privilege and honor. I can't wait. It'll be interesting to see if we can ever stop talking.
Literally, I know. Seriously, I feel like this is just gonna be like flowing so nicely with everything that we can share here. So
Here, here.
I want to get right into it because your book Enough very much spoke to me in so many things. And I'm sure would speak to so many people in this voice of not feeling enough. And I love how you compared that enough voice to the not enough voice and how this all gets integrated into our lives. And why is it, do you believe that so many of us struggle with feeling like we're not enough, that we're not doing enough? And why is that so rampant, especially with women?
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, so much of this precedes us by millennia, right? At
Mhm.
some level. I mean, I don't know how far if we go to trace back, but the nature of, I think, just as surviving in the world, right? There's necessary coping mechanisms that develop along the way that really serve at a moment, but we don't evolve out of them, and I think, you know, for those of you who study the brain, we have all the different levels of the brain, right? The amygdala and the mammalian brain and the, prefrontal cortex and all that kind of stuff. Like we're still developing, right? So for us to really understand that, oh, a threat in a relationship is not a threat, it's just a human. So you layer that as a foundation of us, I think, still kind of being primal animals looking to survive. And then you add on top of that the fact that, like, the world has not been set up for women to succeed for as long as I've been alive, and my mother was alive and my grandmother was alive. And I don't know, like, again, another moment where I'm not quite sure. So to me, it's interesting. The more experiences I have in life, the more I'm like, oh, that kind of makes sense. And I think, if anything, I continue to see why it all makes sense, that I feel like not enough. And again, we could talk this whole hour on all the stories that I have or that you have or that others have of, when someone gaslit you, they look past you, they like it's all these little micro, harms that build our sense of self and our beliefs and all those kinds of things. So, at one level, like, of course, and again, even as an adult, when I was at one of my companies and I was reporting our financials, and, the person across me who was supposed to be listening looked to the guy next to me who had nothing to do with them. Like that is a moment of non-existence as a human ass adult, right? Where I know better and I'm at this moment, but it still has that, like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Am I crazy? There must be something wrong with me, right? So it's not even like something, oh, now we're more mature than that. No, 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 no. It's happening all the time, every day. And so I think it's really about our strategies, right? To be so radical in thinking otherwise.
Oh, totally. Absolutely. And it's like you speak about that moment, like it hits you at the core too. It's
Yes.
something so deep. It's not like your brain be like, okay, that's no big deal. Like there's something deep to that when that happens of like experiencing someone doing that where you makes you kind of pull up those not enough stories that you've had for maybe decades you don't even realize that are there.
Exactly. And it is so core and it's so primal and it's so like an unconscious driver amongst
Mhm.
a lot of things that we do, right? And again, another nuance, like, this is a little biased towards women, but like we are sensitive humans. We're wired sensitively. So we're gonna feel it more, we're gonna notice it more, we're gonna take it in more. And you add that on top of our desire, whether people are mothers or not, married or not, to take care of everyone, and it really just amplifies, I think. It just exacerbates that already, latent kind of issue. And I remember this was probably a year ago, but I did a blog post on imposter syndrome. And I felt like, oh God, am I really going to do this? Like I have read 1,000 of these. It is not news, but I couldn't help it. You just have
Yeah.
those moments where it's just still so alive and present that I'm like, no, it's still here. We still got to keep talking about it.
Yeah. Totally. It's
Yeah.
so true though. It's like it's one of those messages I think when you've grown up with feeling like you're not enough and you have all this, quote evidence to show you that you're not enough,
Yeah.
it you could be a super successful person and it can still be there running in
Yeah.
the background. And
Yeah.
it's often successful people that do experience that as a way to overcompensate for the messages that they feel. So,
Exactly. And
yeah.
as somebody who works with people one on one like you do, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes when things look the most put together and
Mhm.
successful is where I get the most nervous because you look under the hood of that car and you're like, whoo,
Mhm.
it's just an overcompensation in the other direction, which is again more of your work on the perfectionism and things. But like we all find our ways to deal,
Yeah.
and some is, insecurity and some is an overcoping on I'm going to control and be perfect at everything. Therefore, I'll never have to face the
Mhm.
real vulnerability that I feel, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's amazing how long you can turn a blind eye to it and just go
Yeah.
through the motions of letting
Oh,
life
trust me.
control you.
I joke with folks. I don't think I wrote the book for anyone other than myself. And I think the
Mhm.
moment that it was like published and in my hand is really when it really started teaching me at a much deeper level. And
Mhm.
so, it's just, it shines the spotlight,
Mhm.
at a brighter way. And so, I can give you examples from the last day, the last week, the last whatever that are just still alive and present, right? And
Mhm.
so, yeah, I think it's a journey and an experience for us to have. But for me, it was really useful to, uh, and I say this like these individuals came into my life as characters. Like enough really did come into my life. She became someone, something, some entity, some energy I interacted with, and so I believe that was for me to benefit from a real teaching and all that kind of stuff. But that's where it's been useful,
Mhm.
to understand it. I'm like, oh, I see you. I
Yeah.
see you over
Yep.
there. I
Yep.
get you. Okay. You know?
Totally. It was like I love how you like picture them as characters because it's almost like you can remove yourself from the situation and be like, oh, that's not truly who I am. It's just the voice that's speaking to me. So I absolutely love that. Sometimes, it's like when you're nose up against a painting, you can't see it for what it is, and you step back and you're like, okay, I see what's
Yeah.
going on here.
Yeah. Again,
Yeah.
I think there's nothing new under the sun in some ways, when it comes to a
Yeah.
lot of these topics. But, at least for me, it's allowed me to increasingly lean into different ways of bonding, to
Mhm.
really have, in my tool belt, for lack of a better word, ways to not kind of not indulge it, not take it as seriously, not really buy what it's selling,
Yeah,
at a
absolutely.
deeper way. Yeah.
Mhm. As you did your own work and you started uncovering some of the things that were going on under the surface, were you able to see some of the root causes from earlier on, or what did that look like for you?
Yeah, for sure. And here's what's, strange about that whole setup. Like I have done personal development for decades. I have
Mhm.
taught it. I've, named the course. I've probably experienced it, read the book, done the video. Okay. And so in some ways, what was strange is you get to these places like, well, I did that. I can tell you what my core limiting beliefs are. Originally I thought my core limiting belief was I'm not enough, but really underneath that, it's I'm bad. Right.
Mhm.
And I can trace that back to early trauma. I can trace it back to all the things that I continue to do therapy about. Right. And so my head might know, but then I think, part of the maturing over time is allowing my body to experience and understand and validate and all those kinds of things to say, oh, yeah. So it's not just that, these things happened and therefore you had these kind of trauma responses over time. That's true. And, right? That's true. And now, how, as an adult woman, do I be with that? How do I validate it in a way that then I can, get some better ways to adjust, to adapt, to understand at a different level? And again, I will say the blessing of enough coming into my life is like, there's the work part of it, right? The work part of, what are the repairs, the reattachment with myself, all that kind of thing to happen. But then, she's also opened these doorways to like outrageously, inviting me to possibilities I just had never considered. Like all these rules that, because of how we respond and how we see the world, really narrow our vistas, right? So, I'm in questions of things about my life, my lifestyle, the structure that I would never have considered 2 years ago. And it is such on the other side of that, or partnered with it, I guess more aptly said, is like it's beautiful, it's emerging. It is the spirit spaces. It's the knowing I'm not alone, knowing I'm totally guided every minute, knowing there's, and me being allowed to validate that. Like an early coach I worked with had helped me, facilitated me to certain decisions, right? And one of the decisions, it had a meaning back then, but it's got a deeper meaning now, which was I get to know what I know and I
Mhm.
get to choose what I choose, right? So, well, yeah, you get to know what you know. Well, that's validating any experiences that you might have been like, but they didn't see it. They didn't said that happened. They didn't, right? So there's that piece of it. But if we stretch into that spirit space, I get to know that I'm constantly surrounded. I get to know that I'm blessed and being guided. I get to know that when I have a energetic feeling about something, that is as true as if I poked my finger on a needle. It is as real for me, right? And so I think these things like we can look at and know, okay, what were those childhood instances? What were the related things? What were the choices I made? But then there's a whole nother, kind of next level or next layer that emerges over time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a pivotal and powerful realization when you come to that. It's like you live in just this human realm and you think that life is happening, against you. And when you start to realize that everything is really happening for you, it is so expansive. And that's
Yeah.
such a beautiful way to experience it and realize that you don't have to be stuck in what's happened to you and that every moment you have the ability to transform and transmute that energy.
Yeah,
Powerful.
and I think in the more, I never like I get nervous about thought leaders and experts because, and you've said it in your episodes before, but like I'm always learning, right? So literally what I thought about 3 months ago is a little outdated for the self I am now, right? But at
Yep.
this moment in time, I'll say with that big caveat and qualification, like I also get to be okay with the fact that like even though I know I'm guided and things like that, that may not always feel that way. And I may not always like that experience and all the things, right? Because I think from the flip side, there can be a dark edge to personal development and energy work and things like that in the way that, so as a perfect example, I have a couple good friends who passed from cancer. And, the more life you live, the more that kind of happens. These are, people who did energy work, did alternative things, did, check, 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 right? And it's to understand that we are in this space of allowing and creating our lives, and at the same time that doesn't mean we can all the time make things not happen, right? But I think my perspective of it at this snapshot in time is like there's so much more power we have over the reaction we have to it, right? That is
Yeah.
in itself is such a fuel.
Mhm.
So, somebody can say anything they darn want, and I can either really take it in and feel hurt by it, or I could kind of laugh at it, right? Like that's
Yeah.
such a power to be able to like, oh, I see you there, haha,
Mhm. Yeah.
and to really take back my energy in those moments, right? Like those are the things I've learned over time. And the miracles that can come out of that, right, are amazing. Like again, I keep a little book of, I call it my little miracle journal, but it was when I transitioned out of my last job, but it's some feel very mundane and some are profound. But
Mhm.
it really was my desire to put attention to those things and not gloss over them as if it wasn't so. Right. And so in
Yeah.
that case, like there's so much available when we start to really open our eyes. It's crazy wonderful. And I often say, like, I don't know, at the end of days, maybe I passed and I was totally wrong.
Mhm.
Maybe they're like, yeah, this was just chemical, you're all whatever. And I'm like, I will have had a wonderful life
Exactly.
by the beliefs I chose. So I'm kind of good with that. Like, I
Mhm.
don't actually need to be right.
Yeah. So yes, you're spot on because it's like you can literally choose to live in fear or faith. Like you don't know the outcome of either. Everything
Yeah.
is known, but it's like your choice at every time. So why not choose to believe things are beautiful and wonderful and all working for you in some way? So
Well,
it's
and what the experiences I've had when I choose to
Mm.
live that way, it's profound. Like it really is profound. It's this felt sense of my life, regardless of what's happening, this, deep connectedness, in my being, the way that, I feel like I'm still in the baby steps of learning to regulate my nervous system, but the sense of nervous system regulation when I'm in those expansive, trusting kind of moments is amazing, right?
Yeah.
And so, why would I be doing anything else?
Yeah, it's like when you get a taste of it, you're like, I want more of that, even though it's still that like it's like the waves. Like you have these moments where you're like you feel
Yeah.
very connected and then it comes back down. You're like, oh, where did that
Yeah.
feeling go?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's amazing when you do get that experience. You're like, okay, there is more to what my experience has been. And yeah, it's
Well, and I think to
powerful.
remember, like, and we still have chosen a human experience in whatever
Mhm.
fashion that is right now. So, yeah, of course it comes with that because that's part of whatever this is,
Yeah,
right? So, yeah,
absolutely.
I met with this was years, it's 2019, this African healer guy, and he'd made some comment like, yeah, it's like, life gives us like sometimes we roll out in the open, in our vulnerabilities, like as if the world life is some vulturistic thing ready to prey. And he goes, but it's really kind of like tiny tweaks to remind us that we haven't become all light yet. And that
Hmm.
was like, his name's Maladoma and he's since passed. But I was like, gosh, what a beautiful way to look at our bumps in life.
Yeah.
Like, no, 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 just a little reminder. Yeah, you're still human there. You
Mhm.
go.
Yes, absolutely. And I find that like just when you feel like you're flowing and things are smooth, like life happens again. It's almost
Yeah.
like, okay, thank you for the
Yes.
check. Yes, like
Yes.
I see the reminder to like go down. I have more healing to do in this. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Can you talk about because like I don't know if you've experienced this, but like as you evolve and you start to see aspects of your life differently and raise your level of consciousness, there can also be a lot of grief in the process as
Oh,
well.
so
Like
much.
recognizing maybe the past versions of yourself or the things that you missed out on, or even just as things kind of unravel as you start to evolve. Can you talk about your experience with grief and how that's a real part of all this as well?
Yeah, I think, and I'll say particularly, and even in the last year and a half, I've had some beautiful people who kind of could set context for me to even understand like that's normal, right? Like I might know it cognitively, but to know it kind of physically in the sense of, I think early on as I was starting to like kind of dissect and take things apart, like there is this almost self-criticism, right? Like why did I put myself in this and this and why did I choose this and all that kind of thing. And then you do realize, and you've said this before as well, but you do realize eventually like I did the best I knew with what I had at the moment of consciousness I was, right? That continues to be true. And the embodied sense of what the release is, the morning. So you know um I have enough of kind of posse and friends and support people in my life that they'll be like, how was your day? I'm like, it was a great day. I drove myself to the lake and cried for like 20 minutes.
Mhm.
Like that is part of a morning of something that is allowed to come up and release itself, because even if I cognitively have known it or been aware of it, my body still hangs on to that sadness, that mourning, that what could have been, et cetera. And I find that the more I just give permission, and sometimes it shows up as tears, and sometimes it just shows up as tired, and sometimes like it shows up in all its different ways. But to understand that the more I evolve, the more I unpack, the more I release, the more I'm almost like, intensely called to honor that space, whatever it is. And the more that I do honor it, again, the more of that expansion's available to me. And so, like, sometimes it will look like, okay, I should be doing my business expenses right now and I feel like a nap. I'm going to do the nap.
Mhm.
And that is, I can say it to you because you understand it. So, like, what a wild choice, right?
Mhm.
Like, the
Yeah.
me who was here 5 years ago
Yes.
never, ever, ever would have made that choice,
Mhm.
because the sense of self would come from the achieving of the next thing, even if it was a little to do, right? And so, but to your point, there's a lot of grieving, a lot of mourning, a lot of releasing, a lot of just being with all the feelings of it. And again, I think there is something about the validation of it that really matters.
Mhm.
And I have found, you talk about grieving, even in relationships, like certain relationships evolve with you and certain don't. And there's like mini grievings in each of those, for what was, for what is, for what won't be, which is maybe not even supposed to be, but still there as well. But sometimes we have to make really strong votes for ourself
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
allow the morning over, kind of what the external world, our external locus of control is calling us to pay attention to, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing, because I think it's just hearing that real experience, and especially like as an achiever or someone who feels like, you have some of those beliefs of not being enough. When you start to see some of these lower experiences or emotions, you might be like, oh my gosh, I'm totally derailed for me, or you expect this journey just to be almost like linear and keep going, but it's like that real experience. And when you know that's just part of the process and that's normal and natural, you can be like, okay, that is just giving me more information that I am on the right track of
Well,
everything.
and I just want to double underline what you just said, like, because again, so much of it is about reframing these experiences towards that which I'm evolving, right? And what you just said, that's what it is to me, that reframing of like, now I can say this, and I'm saying recent, like
Mhm.
now in the last 6 months, despite the fact that I might have known better, but I can go have the cry, go take the nap, and go and be literally like, hey, good job, kid. Like,
Yeah.
nice, you let yourself do, like, woohoo, we are doing it. We're doing the
Yeah.
thing. We're doing that next level, right? Which is, again, very different than what that measuring stick might have been before.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's just going through like what you've always known to that new norm for maybe that you're trying to develop. It's like it can be uncomfortable, but that recognition that you give to yourself is really just what keeps you going on that path of like it's not lazy to take a break. Like sometimes you have to, you have to pull the arrow back for it to propel forward quicker. So it's just that moment of allowing yourself to have that space to be able to do that. It's such a beautiful gift to yourself.
Well, and the timing of you mentioning this, because again, I tune in a lot to myself, my guides, all those kinds of things for what's next. And the big message is, it's like, because I'm always looking, okay, what's the next, the next part of the business? What does this look like? Da, da, da. And then and the like what came was, yeah, no, 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 no. You're supposed to prioritize all that other stuff. Like
Mhm.
all the other stuff that felt fluffy, irrelevant, da, da, da. Like that comes first. That's the big rock in the jar. And then these other things will fit in and like trust us, right? Like there's that, and you're like, huh, huh, huh. No,
Yeah.
no, I would like to plan, plot, control, figure out what the positioning is, what the dollar is, what the thing like, but it is like, it's almost more courageous, which is the opposite of our mindset. We thought it was courageous to soldier on and do the next thing and overachieve. And, I really believe this, obviously courage, the core of the word is cœur, which is heart in French, right? And so the fierceness that it takes, the courage to feel, the courage to say, wow, I'm going to just be in this open, expansive, unknown blackness and, you know, have the space is way scarier than staying busy.
100%. Yes.
It's way more courageous, but
Mhm.
it's not what we were taught, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's completely uncomfortable because if you're someone who's used to going, 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 like that's what you know.
Yeah.
That's very comfortable. But yeah, that stillness can feel so uncomfortable. And it is absolutely such a poignant part when you start to realize like, oh, this is what I have to do. I just have to like take care of myself in this moment. This feels so foreign. And yet like it's amazing how you just keep on wanting to go back to things or check the things off the
Oh,
list.
I joke. I'm like, I'm a full-on addict to
Yeah,
those things. Like, I'm just literally
100%.
trying to just slap my hand. Like, oh,
Yes.
there you go again, right?
Mhm.
Because that's how strong that pull is to that. And it is true in that regard. And again, I think just to allow ourselves to be still enough to be wondering about, like, who am I if I am not that? Is a
Mhm.
really like, yes, it's an existential question, but it's just deep and profound and uncomfortable. If
Mhm.
I'm not that, then who am I and where is my value? Right. And I think those are the things we're invited to, that it's so easy to like speed by in the
Mhm.
normal day-to-day pieces. And the truth is, if we allow ourselves to sit with the discomfort, the mourning, all of those things, there is a treasure trove of value. It's not what the world necessarily says. It's not what maybe even a lot of our relationships say. It's maybe not what our jobs say, but we know it in our DNA. You
Mhm.
know, um, and I did this one woman last year, which was just itself, but one of the phrases I used is a bone knower. When you meet another person, that like you're one of those, like you just
Mhm.
know in your system this sense of value and rightness or whatever,
Mhm. Yeah.
and but to allow ourselves to increasingly trust that, to validate that, et cetera. And I think there are some really tactical things that we need to do for that, right? So I woke up with this poem starting to write itself in my head today, which I just realized I
Mhm.
never started writing down. But the idea of it was like to really everyone needs a space, a space of quiet, a space of protectedness, a space of safety. And what was going through my mind was like, it can be a bathroom or a cupboard or like a 4 foot by 4 foot, but it is both physical and emotional and mental, right? Like, where is my place right here where I just get to be with me, where no one else's opinions get to come in, where the outside influences don't get to be here, and I really get to have the sacred of tiny little box to be curious and wonder, and I don't think I'm in the habit of doing those. And particularly if you're busy, if you're a worker, if you're a friend, if you're a mother, if you're whatever, like all the spaces are these shared spaces where it's so easy to lose ourselves.
Yeah.
So how do you start reclaiming, right? And so it for me, like I have those, but I haven't honored them as that. Like it is
Mhm.
church, it is sacred at that level, and to allow those to be, or if you haven't had them, to set them up. So yesterday there's a business that I coach and consult with, but they have a young employee who just started there not that long ago and is having some issues. And they said, "Will you just meet with her for 15 minutes?" I'm like, "Sure, sure." But what we're talking about is her home, right? And all the like the pull of this and that and all that kind of stuff. And so what we talked about was, is there a space she can create, like physically, literally, emotionally? Like, is it on her couch? Is it in her bedroom? Where is that little tiny place that she gets to come home and for 30 minutes, like and I don't care what you do in that. Like you can play a video game, you can binge watch, you can make it noisy, you can make it quiet, you can do whatever you want. But there is a muscle of, crafting that I think most of us are not in the habit of because the shoulds and the not enoughs are all there,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. I love that too. And just creating that safe space and making it a physical thing. And that becomes like that cue of this is your time. This is your moment. You can shut out the world in this moment. It's almost like, we get wired that way. And when we're children, we have a blanket or a stuffed animal
Yes.
that becomes our little safety token. And it's like having that cue to be like, it's okay to relax now. You can take a deep breath. I absolutely love that. It's such a beautiful gift to anyone listening right now. Like, okay, how can you start to craft that in your own life to start this where you can create just a few minutes a day of feeling
Yes.
like you're with yourself. You're not
Yes.
the version of you that has to be for everyone else.
Well, and again, you're with yourself without, you can get the judgments, but let them go, right? You're with
Yeah.
yourself. And like, it doesn't matter if you're conscious or unconscious, if you're like you just get to be in that little
Mhm.
crafted space. And yeah, I think and, if we move into kind of more of the energy sense about it, at least my felt sense is the more I have crafted those spaces, like they literally develop an energetic life of their own. Like there are certain spaces that feel better for me to be in that are more than just what I've positioned in them or whether it's clean or not, right? That have had an energy buildup of me being with me that then, continues to amplify and grow. And I think in the flip side of it is realizing how many spaces I've surrendered and abandoned that I don't get to exist in for
Mhm.
whatever reason, fill in the blank, somebody else's needs, somebody else's desires, somebody else's criticisms. And I feel like, at this stage of my life, I'm not only like honoring those spaces, I'm trying to expand my existence.
Mhm.
I'll give a funny example just from last week. So, I've struggled with my body my whole life. I think there's no woman who hasn't in some fashion, but I was on a work trip and I threw in my bathing suit. I don't normally do that. And because I'm not someone who historically like done laps or something in a pool when I'm on a trip, but I did. And it was a driving trip. So it was easy to do that. And so I had gone down to the pool and I had just given myself permission to be like to be there. Like I don't have to check off a box of exercise. I don't have to go back and forth a certain number of times at like, which again, for me, those are all big achievements, right?
Mhm.
And so I got to decide whatever it was, but noticing myself walking back in the hallway, like I have my one piece, big bodied suit on. I'm wet. I got this little towel that barely fits around my waist. It keeps falling off. And like, it's literally like two experiences of myself, the one who listens to a not enough and the one who's more leaning into enough. And the not enough one is like, oh my God, cover it up, hide it, make yourself as small as you can in the elevator. There's two business people, I can paint the scene, right? But again, is the sense of enough, continue to burgeon in my life. It's like, wait, what? Like, why would you be making yourself smaller? What, why are you trying to take up less space? Isn't that interesting? Isn't that funny? So here I am, again, not totally dripping, but wet in this bathing suit, da da da. And again, there were some executives at a conference in the hotel, and I heard the one guy had a French accent, and I was a French major in college. So I said, "Oh, vous êtes français?" So I started a conversation. I'm like, I cannot believe I'm standing in this elevator in my one-piece bathing suit,
Mhm.
looking like But it had nothing to do with him or the exchange or whatever. It was taking up the space.
Mhm.
Like I literally get to be the size I am,
Mhm.
not the size the world expects me to be, not the size that it would be more comfortable if all women were, not any of that. No, just here with all of that space. And that's a new thing for me.
Yeah.
Carving the safe space is one, but this is like, man, I'm in public at a hotel. What's going
Mhm.
on?
And what beautiful validation for your journey and getting to that place where you can just honor yourself and not deprive yourself of that experience. It's
Yeah.
like when we try to fit the world's expectations, it's only going to leave us feeling drained and not enough. And it's something we all experience. And I think we have to always remind ourselves of that. I love how you talk about the dialogue between the enough and the not enough in that experience. Cause I'm like, oh yeah, I have definitely been there. But it's like if you didn't allow yourself to just go enjoy the pool and just be and just then walk freely, like look at the energy you most likely carried then versus like trying to like cover yourself and feel like who's looking at me, what do I look like, I mean we've all been there and it's such a like oh
What a
constricting
waste, right? At
energy.
some level. And that's where I think
Yeah.
about like when I talk about her enough opening up these doors and possibilities and vistas, I'm like, you have these whole cognitive micro moments of like, oh my gosh, if I'm not spending the energy, like how much of my energy is that? And I
Yeah.
remember this, like I have, journals and online journals that I've, kept inconsistently on and off over time. And as I started on the experience, it really was when the book started writing itself. But I was I can't remember, it would be like search a keyword or go back to it. The quantity of journaling that
Mhm.
was about me criticizing myself
Mhm.
and or some magic body I was supposed to have or some magic whatever it was. It was so sobering
Mhm.
because it was like all the entries come up if you because you can do a digital
Yeah.
search, right? And I was like, that is how I spent decades. Like this was where I put my energy. And so, contrary to this, okay, not being used there. Holy
Mhm.
cow, what could I be doing? Like
Seriously.
there are so many possibilities of where that life force can be, attuned, put attention to, et cetera, that is kind of wildly outrageous,
Mhm.
right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, like, and we've all been there. You realize how much your mind is ruminating on all those things over and over and over again. And like, what are you missing in your environment? What are you missing within yourself that like your attention's not on? And
Yeah.
yeah, it's such a beautiful realization, but it's also, yeah, I mean, you said sobering 100%. You go back to those moments, you're like, gosh, you just want to give that younger version of you a big hug because,
Oh, so hug
oh,
her, so tender her, and
yeah,
knowing that she's not going to believe me because she can only believe what she can see, but
yeah,
just like it's all going to work out. Like if you had known you'd get through this and known you'd get through the next thing and known you'd
yeah,
get through the next thing, there probably would have been a lot more, you've used the word a lot too, but grace, right?
yeah.
For in perspective for that human who was just having a moment at the time because, she could only see things through a certain lens and that has changed, and that's where it's like it's interesting to be kind of at this stage of life and feel like every day I kind of feel like I'm
Mhm.
starting something and I don't even know where it's going and it's really kind of cool and fun,
Yeah.
and you were just talking about those moments, but that's what as this story started to emerge and write itself, I was so blown away by like the book is filled with just these little micro moments of experiences with people, but as I orient that way, there are so many, like so many. And this was, I was telling someone this yesterday, but it was Easter a couple weeks ago, and I was driving in my car. We live in the city in Chicago, and there was a man at a bus stop who's clearly going to an Easter mass, and he had the hat and the suit and he was just all put together and like because like this is what I do now. It's like I, got the window going down and I was like, "You look amazing." I'm
Oh,
shouting as I'm, driving by and then I realized like I was going so fast he might have thought I was like calling him names. I'm not quite sure. But
no.
the point is like I get to have those moments. Like it's not
Yeah.
even about him even though that's how I felt. It's about that I get to have that experience. So
Mhm.
that wasn't for him. I'm the one that felt great afterward,
Yeah.
and not out of some false, oh, I should compliment people. No, 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 no. I felt the urge bubble up And I honored it. And I'm like, do it. And so what? So the person behind me thinks that's like, so
Exactly. Yeah.
what? We're all gonna be dead in a second, like,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
It reminds me of something you share in the book when someone was dancing and you like just started dancing with them. Like, I love that, like, why
Yeah.
not have fun?
Oh,
Like,
that was so
yeah.
funny. And again, it was a trip with some girlfriends, and literally like, this guy's moving. I mean, we're in the car and we're getting close, and it's a construction worker. He's in a big orange, vest, one of those day glow kind of vests. But I thought there was something wrong with him because he was moving in such extreme ways. And I'm literally like, my cognition is going, he's having a seizure. Why don't they know? Aren't they? Because we're far enough away that I can't see, right? And then no, sure enough. And again, it's hot. It's
Yeah.
asphalt. It's hot. It's 90 degrees. And he's just dancing his butt off, holding his sign.
Awesome.
And again, it just was one of those moments like, go, and nobody else is. It's not like
Mhm.
his coworkers or whatever. And so, yeah, I just immediately I'm in my seat driving and I'm dancing like woo
Awesome.
woo. And then he makes eye contact. And then so we have this moment. And then the people in the car with me start doing the same thing. And again, we passed him 3 times in that trip, but it became this like sweet bonding thing. Like, are we going to see our
Yeah.
buddy? Right.
That's
But
so cool.
so many moments like that in life that we, don't, I say slow down, but you physically don't even need to slow down. We were going past him pretty quickly, but, that we miss, I guess, that are
Yeah.
just treasures in and of themselves.
Yeah, and I love how, like, the energy is contagious, whether it's, like, the upbeat, joyful energy or if it's the lower energy, like, it's all contagious, so you get to choose what you wanna spread throughout the world in that moment, so
Well,
I
I've
love that.
taught emotional intelligence for several decades, right? Like
Mhm.
that's exactly what the research shows. It's
Yeah.
not even like a hypothetical thing. Like they've
Mhm.
done studies where truly emotions are contagious when you walk in a room. So to really honor and understand that, yes, if I choose to be in a different, like him choosing to be in that different space, put my car in it, like to, in my mind, I sometimes like this, all the ripple effects are of kinds of
Yeah.
things, those moments, those touches. It's
Mhm.
so easy for us to kind of break up camps, us versus them. Everything's a problem. Here's what's not working. But from the flip side, there's probably so many beautiful moments of touches that we just can't see because it's not what we report on the news. you know
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
yeah.
and it's like again that just like sharing those like I'm reading the book and I'm like I can like picture that and so like now the ripple effect like I'm like oh I love that like next time I see somebody dancing I want to go join them like so it's amazing you can see how all that really plays on each other. Going off of that, so when you are really in tune with yourself and you're really honoring your energy, can we talk about boundaries? So how do you protect
Oh, yeah.
your energy in those moments and really be able to allow yourself to move through life with what you choose.
Yeah, and I think like there's so many great books about boundaries and setting, like again, as somebody who's been in, reflective development fields for years, like it's not new, right? But it was just sort of mind-blowing for me in this experience of understanding what's possible, right? And I feel like literally, pulling the veil off my eyes between what I thought that meant and what it didn't mean. And in the book, I talk about big nose and small nose. And so I felt like over time I got good at the big nose, the big boundaries. Like if somebody really violates your ethics, your sense of responsibility, or does harm to someone, like, yes, I could rally myself to say no, and stop and all those kinds of things. So you're like, okay, yeah, I've got that muscle. I got that down, right? But the bigger insight was like all of the, small yeses I would make that should have been small nos, right? And that's a boundary in itself. So to say, somebody will ask you to do something and it's not hard to do. So again, you're like, you should do it. But the real answer, if I'm tuned into myself, is like, yeah, no, I either don't want to, it's not a fit for me, it doesn't work with what I'm desiring and doing right now, right? That's the place where I feel like I was, death by a thousand paper cuts, right? And I say that like every little small yes like that that's not really a yes, like all of a sudden it's crowding your life, your calendar, your home in all these different ways. And so for me, that was the bigger work, is yes, still honor and work the muscle of the big nose, but at the same time, start with the small nose, right? And book, I say, beautiful boundaries, zero apologies.
Mhm.
And that was also a muscle, which is to say, and this is all the time now for me, right? It's like at first it was so uncomfortable and now it's just gotten pretty comfortable. But, I was in an event like and somebody said, are you going? And I said, no, and I had already RSVP'd no, whatever. And this is not the person putting on the event. It was a mutual friend. And she knows me enough now where she was like, so is that because you have a conflict or is it just a no? And I loved it because she knows
Yeah.
the difference with me now. I'm like, no, it's just a no, you
Yep.
know, and, and I've had other ones like, yes, I did conflict. And if I didn't conflict, it's still a no. But I
Mhm.
had never given myself the permission to do that, A, and B, to see the thousands of small spaces, right? I just
Mhm.
felt like what it was to be a good human was
Mhm.
actually sacrificing myself in these tiny, tiny, tiny little ways over and over again. And I still catch it like, hello, I have, children. I have a spouse. I have, like my kids are now teenagers. And it's like, I still watch myself, make the choice for them over me and go, oh, honey, 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 right?
You're good.
But the consciousness, the awareness of it, and I really do believe, and I use this metaphor in the book, but as I plant those small no's, they are seeds, right, that grow into these beautiful hedges, these beautiful pieces that it's not a big, violent thing. It's like a beautiful garden that is protective and gorgeous and whatever, and in which I have a lot of fluidity, you know
Mhm.
my yeses really mean a lot when I do them because I'm, increasingly, not perfectly, but increasingly tuned into what would fill the cup up, what would
Mhm.
expand my energy, what feels most aligned with my life force, and all those kinds of things. And so it really has been a piece of work. And even like, I have a good girlfriend and there's a group of us that get together, about quarterly for dinner. And she wasn't going to make the last one. And, she had said in my voicemail, she's like, later, it was kind of, oh my gosh, I feel so bad because, and, I had said back to her, we just were exchanging voicemails. And I said, listen, it doesn't matter. Your
Mhm.
no is fine. Like,
Yeah.
if we can't do that for each other, if we
Mhm.
can't even say, you get to just change your mind and say no at the last minute and it's okay, then how are we supposed to do this with anyone else? Right. And that was just true. Like, it was one of those days she tuned into herself and she just couldn't rally. I mean, she could have rallied. She didn't want to rally. It didn't make sense to rally. There
Mhm.
were other places her energy needed to go. And it was huge for her to make that choice. And so I think even in supporting each other, particularly as women, can we fan that flame, honor it? Can we be the person who doesn't say, oh, do you have a conflict?
Mhm.
Oh, do you have something else going on? Oh, like, no, it's none of my business. It
Yeah.
really is none of my business. Like, again, I know that the oft quoted no is a complete sentence, but truly,
Mhm.
for us with friends, because I think again, sometimes we're the worst perpetrators of that.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
it's innocent sometimes, but we do
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. You feel like you always owe somebody an explanation of like why you can't do things and the reason you over explain things. And it's like, again, just another way to drain it or like give you that justification of like the no. So it's just,
Yes.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
and it's interesting how much power you can regain when you don't do that. And again, I feel like this just keeping my eyes to more things, but you still learn more of the people around you, and it could
Mhm.
also be in settings or different things that way. Like, there may be times where it's appropriate to say, okay, I need to trade off this task for this task, blah, 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 or to work on something collaborative. I'm not saying that's not the case, but it's fascinating to see who feels really entitled to your calendar
Yeah.
and your insides and your sorts. It is fascinating, right?
Mhm.
And for me to start to increasingly discern, like, oh, like, okay, I thought I knew you. Now I know you at a different level. And the fact that you still think that's okay
Mhm.
to, insert yourself there, like, I choose to leave a little distance between us, more than I did before, because you know what? That's not working for me.
Mhm.
The people that I choose to have in that tighter knit circle are going to be the ones that honor that. And then there'll be people in the medium circle and people further out. But, it helps you get to know the people around you as much as yourself.
Absolutely. And so it's such a game changer when you start respecting yourself and you start to take accountability for your own way that you're conducting yourself. And then it's like it forces other people to change. And so
Yes.
that can, you can often, like you should share that example. You can often see people for who they are when you're not the one always accommodating.
Well, and even that, like, I think about, because I think the personal responsibility about it is so huge. Like, I think about how much I would complain about the calendar I created. Like,
Mhm.
and again, I have the blessing of, having started my own business a number of years ago. So there really is nowhere else to point the finger for anything else that's going on in my life. Yes, there's stuff you have to deal with. I don't mean that, but it's like, oh, that's interesting, isn't it, there, honey?
Yeah.
You want to complain about the very thing you committed, agreed to, and set up. That's kind of something, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, that some of those patterns can still come up, and it's like, oh, did you overcommit? Are you still thinking you can do all the things? And
Yeah.
maybe the calendar becomes that like mirror of reflection of like, oh, yes.
Well,
So,
and I think to reserve the right, like, to change my mind and notice, like,
yeah.
there really is nothing that's static in our world, right?
Mhm.
Everything's always in motion. And so part of the increasing grace I try to give myself is like, again, you said it before, but I responded in a way based on who I was at that particular second in time. And guess what? It's 15 minutes later. Now
Yeah.
I'm having some self-reflection and
Mhm.
realizing there might be a better choice, and I get to go back, change my mind, do something different, in this ever evolving thing. And I'm not even positive that there's a quote unquote right and wrong about it. It's just an experience to have. And I'm, increasingly leaning into my own satisfaction, becoming, joy, delight, all those things. And so as I increasingly lean in there, there are different kind of sorts that I continue to do and I'm going to do over time. And I think that's the kind of possibilities that emerge as we lean that way.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's just a beautiful journey when you start to see life through a new lens, when you start to recognize things that are not always as they may seem, and that you
Yeah.
can create what your experience is.
Yeah.
One thing I just want to ask you is, so when you start to recognize the not enough voice and the enough voice, and you see that awareness, what would you say to someone who sees that? And then what would be the next step of like how to start to rewire that and change it so that you hear more of the enough voice?
Yeah. Well, a couple things. One is I really think uh, the paying attention to the not enough. And again, I didn't intend to make it a character.
Mhm.
Like this book really was something that sort of entered my life, unbidden, but it really is helpful, right? So again, as the book was evolving over time, like, somebody asked me in one of these interviews, like, can you picture not enough? Like, he's it's not exactly a person in the way you would think, but I can't see it, feel it. It's a distinct energy, right? But
Mhm.
it kind of got more ludicrous over time. Like you
Mhm.
just get it has no clothes, it's charade of it, all this stuff. It is helpful for me to characterize him that way, right? Because then I don't have to, like, there's something about the humor, right, that comes in that allows a little bit more of a crack to not take it so seriously.
Mhm.
Like when I'm getting myself in trouble is when I'm really taking that not enough voice seriously, right? So again, in my early development work, it'd be like, well, yeah, I don't feel like I'm done it, but it was all heavy and significant, right? And
Yeah.
so when I can picture that voice and tune into it, right, the not enough one just as much as the enough, that helps a ton because I can go, I see you, I hear you, almost like it's a being, right? I see you, I hear you. No, thank you. Not
Mhm.
today. I'm trying something else, whatever it is. So that to me is essential because, again, what happened to me when the book got published is I only saw it more, not
Mhm.
less. So I just realized it in more of micro moments, right? So I think that's really essential. For me in the enough space, it's kind of what we were talking about before. Like we need cracks in our routine. And again, I about the book, like, cracks in the sidewalk where that little plant can grow up. Like we really look down walking, life is always trying to grow in the cracks. But if we don't give it a crack, and I don't care how small, I don't care if it's a minute, I don't care if it's whatever it is, to just be with myself, it is very difficult to hear enough's voice. And I think, he screams, she whispers, right? And so to be quiet enough for that little moment so that I can start to hear, sense, trust, right? So I think, giving him a characterization really matters. Again, doesn't have to be a him for other folks, whatever your not enough is. really creating cracks to listen to enough. And then I really think it's important to begin to surround ourselves with others who validate our reality.
Mhm.
Because, I know for me, when I was, kind of singing not enough's tunes, I listened to all the voices around me who like amplified, right? So I don't care like one person, you can listen to Kelly's podcast person right there, right?
Mhm.
Listen to someone who knows that, oh, no, 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 this other thing that you're feeling, this voice inside your head, this experience you had, like, I'm real, we're real, it's real, right? So,
Yes.
as much as we can, have a friend, and over time for me, like I literally have developed a network of connected people who believe it just as much so that
Mhm.
I get to live in that reality and that
Mhm.
that reality gets to be just as valid, if not more, than the other one I was living in, right? Which again, that's more of the ongoing journey. So I'm blessed now to have quite a group of folks that believe that, feel that, and et cetera. But that took time. And I'm not somebody who was always great at making friends or groups of friends that like I didn't know myself enough to find my way in those spaces because I was always looking outside for my validation. And so, like, it's a new thing as a more adult woman to go, okay, what is it to create a friendship based on enough? And it doesn't come with the old rules. It's not because we went to college together. It's not because we had a shared trauma bonding experience at a job. It's not because whatever. It's just because there's a resonance. And I think like those three things to me are like essential kind of along that journey. But it's amazing in that space, like when you get resonance, like it doesn't have to be long. So, there's a woman that when I was working at my last job, she was a recruiter we had used. And, we were on a phone call first time, like I felt the resonance. I don't know
Mhm.
why. It's not even, it's not like we had shared experiences that made all that kind of stuff. And so she and I've just lightly stayed in touch over time. And when I put my book out, gosh, she was one of the first to order it, put up a review. And then, and again, we had just stayed connected. Well, then it ends up her child is in college in town where I live. And so we had coffee 6 months ago because
Oh my
she was
gosh.
in town. Like,
Awesome.
this is a resonant spirit for me
Mhm.
who can amplify enough with, but it doesn't even make sense,
Yeah.
right?
I
But
love that though.
as I look and feel for what that is, boy, there are people out there,
Yeah.
and so for me, like kind of those steps, like noticing the not enough voice, making it a characteristic, then giving the cracks and the time to allow enough in, and then beginning to, surround yourself with other people who believe. And I used to joke, like I keep joking, I'm gonna make this t-shirt, but it is like the Tinkerbell and Peter Pan, like I believe, like
Mhm.
no, I think that's really, really important,
Yeah.
for us to do for ourselves and for each other.
Mhm, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing all those. That's just it's so like it very much resonates with me and everything you said and just gives us something that we can really hold on to and give us hope that like if we're feeling like we're not enough, like here are some things that we can start to notice. And just hearing that, like you said, plants the seeds so you can start to see more of that within your life. So it's absolutely beautiful. And I have to ask you a question because one of the things you had in your book was the sidewalk chalk. And I want to know, are you still doing that? Because I absolutely love that.
Yeah, so for those who haven't read it, the way enough came to meet me was because we had like I was cleaning out a shelf in a cupboard and had run across some old sidewalk chalk when the kids were little, and I found an old glass jar that we had sitting in the garage. I put it out on the front sidewalk and I said, "Please write or draw," and had this just sort of profound experience when this little kid had come by made his parents stop for sure, right? And I was sitting on the porch, but they couldn't see me, I couldn't see them. And I had drawn just some colorful circles before I did this. And I thought he had done a scribble. I literally thought, oh my gosh, I have kids. Like I'm sure like it was an unidentifiable scribble, but when they had left in our sidewalk and hear voices, I just thought, oh, I'm just down because I want to be. And I'm not kidding, like this was the mic drop moment. This kid had taken those spheres that I had made and put rings around them, like made them into planets. He made them into universes. There were stars in the back. Like it was, I cried. I mean, I just sat there and I like get teary thinking again because my sense was enough had tendrils and she wrapped them around me and said, like, this this is the moment, this is what it's all about. It's like I did nothing, quote unquote, in the achievement thing, cleaning something out. I didn't even have any, I didn't go buy anything, right? And this kid gave me such a gift that day, right? And so that was like one moment, and the sidewalk chalk became a thing. Like,
Mhm.
we are known for it in the neighborhood,
I love
including
that.
we still do it, to answer your question
Aw.
directly. Somebody last spring, we were a little late to the game. We haven't put it out yet. And somebody said, "Are you still doing the sidewalk chalk?" Because it's now been years.
Mhm.
And I've developed relationships with people I've never met because I know their artwork, or I know a slogan they'll put on, or whatever it is. And just to see, again, I say it's like the shared messages on our hearts that
Mhm.
aren't our jobs, what we do, all the trappings, all that kind of stuff has been quite beautiful. And, somebody asked me in one of these interviews, I'm like, I was thinking about, I'm like, do it. Like, you got some old sidewalk, put it out, put this little sign,
Yeah.
and let yourself be in communion with other folks in a different way. So yes, it's still going on, still
I
alive
love
and
that.
well.
Oh, I know, I read that, I was like, "I don't live in a city, but it makes me wanna live in a city just so I can have that experience." I love that.
Yeah,
Those
well,
are
and
the
finding
things.
other things that are like that, because I've
Yeah.
now had other people share stories of that. And I think, again, although we had a sidewalk and chalk to do it with, I think it really is like sharing ourselves and what we
Yeah.
have available, right, in
Mhm.
some fashion, right? Like, we just all have this stuff that we don't even honor or recognize as, again, quote unquote, sitting around in our garage, but it could just be, caring about somebody. So yesterday I was at a coffee shop working, and the one of the baristas, he just, first of all, I have not been there in forever. He's new since I had been there. I was there the day before, but I had not been there at all, like a year. And from that day to the next day, he's like, "Oh, to go cup, but for here, right?" And I,
Mhm.
again, love when someone remembers me. I
Yeah.
feel seen, heard, understood. And I said, "Yes." And then he said my name, and he's like,
Aw.
"Barbara." Now, again, I know how many transactions were happening while I sat there for 2 hours on that day. I only ordered one cup of tea, right?
Mhm.
So the fact that, so anyway, I said, I'm like, "All right, who are you? Like, tell me about, we get in this whole conversation." So, and he asks me what I do for work and all these things. Well, he's putting together his first proposal for this coffee consulting. He's got a book he's handwritten 8 chapters of the last
Wow.
15 years, that is a beautiful, right? I have a friend. Right. And again, this is not like, I'm an introvert. I'm not saying this like I'm some big social gal, right? But it wasn't sidewalk chalk. It was acknowledging somebody's energy and spirit in that moment, that now, I know he was not even going to be here the rest of the week, because that's the exchange we had. I'm like, "Well, I'll
Mhm.
see you when you're here next time." But I told him, and I said, "Listen, if I can help you get the book done, if I can help you with the proposal stuff, if that's new to you, I do it all day long. Like, I'm happy while we're here to help contribute in that way." So it doesn't have to be the chalk, right? But
Yeah.
I think when we give because our cup is overflowing, not because we have to, like, miracles abound.
I love that. And I think that's something we're all deeply want, is a sense of connection and feeling like we matter. And just like you said, that you're heard, you're being seen by other people, and that you have this resonance with other people in that moment. It's so beautiful, and it's something just so like heartfelt when you have that experience with anyone. So I'm so grateful for everything you've shared, with the sidewalk talk and then that experience, because it's those moments that really are so transformative each
Yeah.
and every day.
Well,
And
and I think about that, like, at the end of the day is what really matters, right? And this
Mhm.
is, as you work with people on their perfectionism and the drive and all that kind of things, I mean, you really do, like, I do fast forward and think, okay, if I'm in that moment, I'm transitioning, what will have mattered to me? And it will have mattered that I loved myself, that I loved other people, that I had connection, that I was, saw someone and was seen by someone. Like, that will matter to me.
Mhm.
The resume won't. And it doesn't mean you can't. Like, I find, and I will say this about it, because sometimes people characterize like, "Oh, you should just take it easy and not," no, 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 no. Like, in the things that I care about and that matter, I drive just as much as I drive, but it's out of a different place. It's not a should, it's not a have to, it's out of sheer, like, joy to do that thing in ways that are illogical sometimes, right? So it's not that we can't and don't need to achieve. In fact, I find that the more I give myself the permission, the space for enough, the more outrageous things come to mind that I want to do, right?
Yeah.
So it's all of that.
Yes, that infinite energy that's always funneling through us, and it's, yeah, allowing that space to have that ability to create those things in this realm. But I
Yeah.
absolutely love that. For someone who wanted to connect with you, grab your book, where can they find you?
Yeah. So the book is called Enough, Finding Peace in a World of Distractions, Hustle, and Expectations. And it's on Barnes and Noble, it's on Amazon, all that kind of stuff for order. And my there's a landing page for my website if you want to get like a little weekly inspiration about Enough. It's called beenough.com. Is a little page. And if it's, something more businessy or about that, my website is corluma.com, corluma.com, which is really came from the, core meaning heart, luma meaning light, and it's where the heart and light cross. So even if I'm in business doing those kinds of things, I still want to bring, that kind of joy and delight to it.
I love that. And I'll make sure everything's in the show notes. So if you're listening, definitely connect with Barbara. And I can't thank you enough for everything you shared today. I've truly enjoyed this.
Thank you. It's just a total honor to be here.
Yeah, it's been amazing. And again, for anyone listening, if you found any value in this, share it with someone who you think could also benefit from this. It's these messages that can't be shared enough. So again, thank you for everyone who's tuned in today.